Guys, this is Mubin. We're talking about the cardiovascular system, and today the lecture is the control of blood flow for cerebral vasculature. Now, this is the physiological control we're talking about. We are not talking about the pathological control. However, understanding this is really important because, at least in US, the fourth, I believe, leading cause of death is accidents. And one of the leading cause in that is the head injuries, especially within the head injuries, then the injuries that increase the intracranial pressure, resulting in the ischemia and infarction of the tissue and the person's death. So the pathological piece will have to be really understood as well. And to understand that, physiological phenomena have to be properly understood. So let's look at it the way this whole structure works. So let's say this is a blood vessel to the brain. This is our brain tissue and this is our body tissue. This is the brain and this is a blood vessel in the brain. This blood vessel, and you know that the blood system is separated from the brain tissue through a blood-brain barrier. So this is a blood-brain barrier. Here, this whole area, the brain tissue, is immersed in CSF, right? So CSF is in what brain is sitting. Blood is separated. Here we've gotten medulla, pons, and midbrain. These are our hero structures that we need to understand and that are going to help us figure out how the cerebral perfusion and flow works. Now, this lecture will not address the changes in intracranial pressure due to hemorrhages and what happens as a result of that. But this lecture would put the physiological foundations, which you're going to get some questions about in the USMLE. So let's start. First of all, the brain's vessel regulation or cerebral flow regulation is all autoregulation. It is not extrinsic. So first primary thing to remember, it is autoregulation. Autoregulation, it is not extrinsic regulation. Well then, if we say that here is a sympathetic innervation to the smooth muscles of the blood vessels of the brain, this is the sympathetic innervation. So it's a question, if somebody asks that, hey, well, we do have the sympathetic innervation. Yes, we do have that innervation, but for the most part, that innervation has no effect on controlling the blood flow to the brain and controlling the blood vessel diameters. So innervation is present, effect of that innervation is not present. All right, so it is primarily autoregulation. So if it is autoregulation, then how does the brain autoregulate itself? Again, you know that there are two theories. One is the metabolite theory and the second one is the myogenic theory. Brain blood vessels use both these mechanisms. If there is sudden increase in the blood pressure, there is increased volume through the blood vessels, then the myogenic theory says that the muscles would contract and try to reduce the blood flow. So that will happen. At the same time, the metabolic theory is even more interesting and more important. Brain changes the blood flow based on its pH. Now, pH of what? pH of the plasma or pH of the CSF? So the first question to answer, are these two separate things? Yes. So this is the key concept to understand for the cerebral blood flow. If you understand this, that the pH of CSF is separately controlled from the pH of the plasma, then you can understand all the rest without any problems. So the first question to answer, why is the pH of the CSF separate from the pH of the plasma? Here is why. Hydrogen ions are the ones that cause, so this is body, and so this is the blood vessel here, and this is the plasma and the blood vessel and tissues here. So hydrogen ions here in the blood plasma cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. They cannot. Why not? Because they're ions. And blood-brain barrier will not allow a charged particle to cross. So because of the ionic nature, hydrogen ion will not be able to come from the plasma to the CSF. So we've established that pH of the plasma has no effect on the pH of the CSF. Now, second thing to remember, the pH of CSF, the pH of the brain's own environment will affect the brain's blood flow. So you say, well, why not just connect them? Why not connect the plasma's pH to the brain's pH and just be happy? No, here is the reason. Look, if brain is getting its blood flow, it doesn't care what is the pH outside, because the pH outside in the plasma can be changing for many other reasons than just the oxygenation. For example, pH can be changed because of the renal functions. pH of the blood outside of the brain can be changed because of what you ate, or if you are vomiting, or if you have diarrhea, or if you're sweating, or if you're eating too much, or if somebody in the hospital gave you some infusion that had some ions in them that disturb the hydrogen ion concentrations. Now, does brain need to change its blood flow in response to all of them? No. However, brain needs to change the blood flow in the situations when oxygen and carbon dioxide balance is imbalanced. That is what brain cares about. It's oxygen and carbon dioxide. So out of these two, brain is also very unique that it doesn't care for oxygen that much. Instead, it cares for carbon dioxide. So if I graph it in the brain, if this is the carbon dioxide levels as they are increasing, and if this is a cerebral perfusion or flow in the brain, as the carbon dioxide increases, the flow in the brain will also increase. That's like this. On the other hand, oxygen, as the oxygen level increase, the flow does not decrease. It doesn't say, I got too much oxygen, I don't want more flow. So blood oxygen levels, if I make the oxygen in red over here, that has an effect like this. So this is oxygen levels. In the beginning, when the oxygen levels increase, flow actually does not change that much. But at some point, if you pathologically increase the oxygen levels, then the flow would start reducing. So brain's primary response is to carbon dioxide changes, then to oxygen changes. We're talking physiological. Now, how does it work? How does it connect pH to carbon dioxide? I think that is what you have done through the respiration and also in the blood. So let's do that quickly over here. When, let's say, I am respiring less, I am hypoventilating, that is building up carbon dioxide in my body. Carbon dioxide buildup will also show up everywhere, right? So increase carbon dioxide here, increase carbon dioxide in body tissues, increase carbon dioxide in the blood that is going to the brain. From there, carbon dioxide is a neutral substance. It can easily move from here, from the blood into the brain CSF. This is the primary player here. As soon as the carbon dioxide comes in, and it is more than normal, there is a normal level, there is normally a level of carbon dioxide that is always coming in. But now let's say it has become more. As soon as that comes in, what happens with the carbon dioxide? We combine it with water and we make H2CO3. From H2CO3, we make hydrogen ions and we make bicarb. This hydrogen ion acts on the ventrolateral parts of medulla. It touches there, and the ventrolateral part of medulla is the central chemical receptor or central chemoreceptor. Central chemoreceptor. And that is why we as doctors should know that central chemoreceptors and their effect is different from peripheral chemoreceptors and their effect. So central chemoreceptor will be triggered. When they are triggered because of increased or reduced hydrogen ion, they would affect the cerebral blood supply. So let's see if the hydrogen has increased. That means carbon dioxide has increased. That means the person has either less oxygen or more carbon dioxide. Either he's hypoventilating or he's gone into an area where there is less oxygen. The result is there is increased carbon dioxide. Brain now needs to keep the flow correct so that it doesn't die accidentally. So now what happens is, as soon as this central chemoreceptor is triggered, We talked about it in our previous lecture that lower 1/3 of pons and upper part of medulla has vasoconstrictor, vasodilator, and cardioinhibitory centers in the reticular formation. These centers would affect the sympathetic nerves and parasympathetic, that is the vagus nerve. Plus, they affect the local areas here as well, and the vomiting center and the respiration centers and other centers will be triggered. For example, when this happens, the brain has to also increase the respiration so that carbon dioxide can be washed out. So the respiration centers will be triggered as well. So we're not talking about that, but as soon as this area is triggered, it is going to work. So let's say we need, what do we need now? More carbon dioxide. Do we need more flow? Yes, we need more flow so that we can wash out and bring more oxygen in, wash out carbon dioxide and ions. So do we need vasoconstriction or vasodilatation? We need vasodilatation. So that will be a mechanism through which will end up causing vasodilation in the body. In the body, change in the ion or pH, increase in the pH, reduction in the pH in the CSF has changed the vessel diameter in the body. That would increase the blood flow to the brain as well. So that is one way of autoregulating. The other way is, of course, as the tissue is working and the oxygen is low because, as we saw, carbon dioxide is more, that means this tissue is going to produce this tissue is going to produce potassium, hydrogen, nitric oxide, bradykinin. These then will diffuse out. Hydrogen and potassium cannot diffuse, I remember that. Nitric oxide and bradykinin especially, they will diffuse out, act on the blood vessels in the brain tissue, and those blood vessels would be dilated. That is also autoregulation. So 3 mechanisms here. Myogenic theory would cause either the constriction or dilation of the blood vessels. Second, local metabolites would increase or reduce the diameter of the blood vessels inside the brain. Third, change in pH would cause the blood vessel dilation or constriction in the rest of the body, increasing or reducing the blood flow to the brain. So that is the mechanism through which brain makes sure that the blood flow is correct. Now there is just to prep you for the intracranial pressure change, there is a Monro-Kellie doctrine which says that within the cranial wallet, so let's say this is the cranial space. In this space, we've got in the brain, hopefully all of us, we've got in the brain, we've gotten blood here, and we've gotten CSF here, right? So these are the 3 things present here. Their collective volume has to stay constant, or they have to be in equilibrium. What does that mean? Let's say a person gets an injury. That injury causes more blood to come and accumulate because there is bleeding. That bleeding would now mean either the CSF has to be pushed out or the brain tissue has to be pushed out of the cranial vault. So remember the Monro-Kellie doctrine, and we will do the intracranial pressure in light of that. Monro-Kellie doctrine or hypothesis. Doctrine or hypothesis. This is what kind of governs what happens when there is intracranial pressure increase. We'll talk about it in the pathology with the cardiovascular system. Thank you very much.